Hi, I'm Rebecca Moore, and this is Art Watch Radio on WCHE 1520, every Wednesday from 1 to 1:30. So happy you could join us. Today, my guest is artist Michael Allen. His solo exhibition at Somerville Manning Gallery is now on view through May 8th. Michael Allen is an American painter focusing primarily on the landscape and the relationships within. His depictions of fleeting moments are a composite of multiple experiences from familiar settings. Derived from a combination of memory, intention, and direct observation, his works seek to present a natural world with a human presence. Hey, Michael, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Rebecca?
Good. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you have created an amazing collection for this show. Can you tell us a little bit about what visitors can expect to see when they visit?
Experiences set in the landscape. When you first look at my work, you see landscape painting, but really they're moments, fleeting moments caught that are just kind of set in the landscape. The work is based on a farming village that's just north of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's a region that I call the Millbach region. The Millbach's like a very tiny farming village that I've just kind of used as a central point for the area. These works in the show span about 3 years of work. I started painting that area back in 2013. The work in the show is all studio paintings. And there are some themes that run through the show. One of the more prominent ones is transition. So you'll see this region in various seasons, various times of day, and you'll be able to connect some of them too visually just by some of the landmarks that you see. So that's your basic viewpoint.
Yeah. And for anyone who would like to follow along as we discuss Michael's paintings, they are all listed on somervillemanning.com, so feel free to check those out. One thing I personally love about your paintings is their sense of intimacy, or at least that's what I feel, and almost a comfort with the natural world around you. Is this feeling something you are purposefully trying to depict, or is that kind of a happy accident?
Thank you. Yes. I mean, it is intentional, and great when a viewer has that experience with it, because it's something that I'm trying to get at. These are places that I've come to know very well, and that I kind of sink myself into, so that I can see it not just as a whole, but as the parts. So as I'm painting them, I want to be immersed back in the space, in my memory, that's now coming out on the canvas. And so, for the viewer experiencing it, I want that sense of intimacy, that sense of immersion. And it's one of the reasons that I choose paint, because I believe paint has that ability to conjure not just an image, but if it can conjure emotion, it can conjure senses. So I want to bring the viewer into that space and have them kind of feel it, smell the air.
More than, let's say, like photography or something, which might have, just more a vision of what it is, where this, you get to create this whole like narrative and portrait of the space in a way.
Right. And in essence, a painting itself can be an experience of its own. So that's really what I'm going for when I when I dive into these paintings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned earlier on that these were all studio paintings. Mm-hmm. Can you take us through your process a little bit? I mean, do you photograph, or is everything from like on-site sketches, or how does that work?
Well, it does change over time. There's one constant, and that's observation. For this particular body of work, I started by doing on-site sketches, both oil on paper and watercolor. They're usually small. They're always once and done. I tend to do multiple paintings in a setting. But I started painting this area in 2013, and really just did on-site sketching, trying to learn the place, learn the color shifts, learn the shift from season to season. And it wasn't until 2015 that I actually started making studio paintings from those sketches. I never really take a sketch and transfer it to a studio painting. I take all of those sketches and kind of use it as a collective to kind of recreate memories that I have from observations in those places. I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. Well, it is interesting because, like, I know so much is based in memory, and I would imagine, from you painting a similar area of landscapes year after year, I mean, not only are you seeing changes with seasons and things like that, but have you seen the area change in other ways? Like, I'm sure buildings have gone up and come down, and new developments have happened, or new farm work, and
and that's an interesting part of what I do as a painter, especially a landscape painter. There's just kind of a running joke in my family that if I paint it, it'll disappear.
Oh gosh!
And because there are times when I'll pick out something in particular. In fact, the one painting in the show, Falling Leaves, there's a prominent tree in the middle, and shortly after I finished that painting, it was cut down.
Oh no!
Which there are always alterations to the landscape that sometimes become part of the paintings. They become part of the series where in an earlier painting it'll be there, and in a later painting it won't.
So it's kind of like how you would like to remember them in a way. Yeah,
and I think memory itself is a collection that is malleable. So even if something has struck me and I really want to paint that, there are times where that doesn't actually come to the canvas for a number of years until I fill in all the blanks. And over that time, it can twist and turn, and things like disappearing trees or a new road put in or a building taken out. Those become part of the paintings too.
Yeah. It also seems like you enjoy finding beauty in just like the small things that happen every day that some people may not even notice. Like, for instance, you're painting Updraft, which at quick glance, lovely soft landscape with a rolling hill in the background. But upon further inspection, you find vultures and hawks circling in the distance and even a dark shadow of one in the foreground. How do you choose which moments to capture like that?
Well, in the case of me being out there actually painting, drawing, or just watching, there are these moments that happen. They're just part of the landscape. They're part of the commonplace. by taking my attention. And that's when I know that needs to be a painting. And from that point on, I just start collecting the visual information I need to create the painting. And part of that is finding all of the pieces that create the whole. So
that's really.
In the case of Updraft, it started with that vulture shadow, and it's kind of a common thing that I see, and I see the shadow before I know the vulture's above me, and when I saw that and kept seeing it, that's what started the idea for the painting.
And it's so interesting because when I look at the painting, I mean, after a couple of times looking at it, I actually didn't even notice the shadow in the foreground, and it's very pronounced, and I'm surprised that I didn't. But I think my mind was so grasped on the landscape and these circling birds ahead, and so to me it was kind of where when you're in real life you see the shadow first and then the bird. I saw it the opposite, and I find that so interesting.
And that's somewhat intentional,
Okay.
As I'm painting that, I don't want it to be too obvious. I don't want it to be too removed that you don't necessarily notice it's there, or even not knowing, if you've never seen that kind of soaring swoop of a vulture shadow cross over the landscape, you might not even really know what you're looking at
exactly
when you see the painting. But I guess in the presence of the moment, you see this shadow, you look up, you see a vulture. In the painting, you can't necessarily do that. But it's one of those. It's the mystery and the curiosity of the moment, the place.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I also want to bring to the viewer. So it's not that I necessarily need the viewer to understand that's a vulture shadow, but I want them to be curious.
Exactly. Well, I think you definitely got me curious about that painting, that's for sure. Your painting Balance is another one of my favorites, and it's one of those that I literally could sit in front of for hours and always find something new in it. To me, it's like my meditative happy place. Sometimes I just sit in the back of the gallery and just stare at it. Can you tell us a little bit about that painting and kind of what went into kind of just like tracking the changes? What I should tell everyone, it's this large landscape, just this field full of butterflies. And I'm sure you got to know those butterflies quite well.
Yeah. And even during the process, trying to figure out what they were, identifying them specifically. Well, I'm so glad to hear talk about the painting that way. And that's exactly the kind of experience that I hope a viewer has with my paintings. That you come to them and you kind of sink into them and find things, question things. Those are the moments that I hope viewers are having with them. And kind of like Updraft, Balance kind of started the same way. It starts with those butterflies. Late summer, they just flutter those fields. And, the paintings aren't based on fixed moments, like you take a photograph and then you paint that photograph. These are truly collective experiences as parts in the whole. So when I'm watching these butterflies, I'm starting to develop a basic composition of what I'd like to portray. And as I'm doing that, like I said before, the shadows, changing the colors. Traffic's moving on various roads. The butterflies are moving all over the place. So I really did want to try and, for that specific painting, I wanted to try and capture a sense of movement all over.
Yeah.
But that painting in particular is really a perfect example of the parts becoming the whole. You know, my initial concept of the painting was, you know, I have to paint those butterflies, just kind of filling the space, filling the air. So I needed an air-filled landscape. I needed all of the movement happening that I would see on various times, and I needed to combine it. You know, they all act together, interconnected. They're interconnected parts of the whole, and no one part is more important than the other. And they balance each other out, and that balance becomes the whole, and that's why I called it balance too.
Yeah, it's like that whole painting is a metaphor for just like our interactions with nature and vice versa, and the kind of ecosystem that we all live in. That's so fabulous. We do have to take a very quick break. So hold on, Michael, but when we get back, we will be back with artist Michael Allen. All right. Welcome back to Art Watch Radio, WCHE AM Radio 1520. This is Rebecca Moore, director of Somerville Manning Gallery, and my guest today is the painter Michael Allen, whose solo exhibition at the gallery is on view now through May 8th. So before the break, we touched on kind of this relationship between nature and humans and kind of the complexity between it all. And in my opinion, one of the most complex paintings in the show, even though it is a smaller painting, is Meandering. And I think it really puts you into the scene, that warm horizontal light blanketing the tops of the trees, the small stream running off the bottom of the painting, and then there's this fire burning in the middle of the field. Now, I live in the city, so I'm not used to scenes like this, but actually the client who purchased the painting said he spent his whole weekend doing this in his new farm. And so can you explain to me a little bit about what's happening in this painting?
Well, thank you. It was one of the more complex paintings to make, and it's one that it took me a while to actually get to the canvas that I was really satisfied with it. And it's really a perfect example of how I use painting to understand my world, because where I live and have grown up in southeastern central Pennsylvania, I'm a half hour from the rural farmland. I'm a half hour from the city, and all the towns in between. So, I really have a nice mix of everything. For the better part of my early career, I painted the town and the city, and it really wasn't until 2013 that I kind of walked into the fields and started looking at the farmland. And quite frankly, half the time I was looking at these things, I didn't understand them either, or why they were
okay, so I'm not alone, yeah.
No, but painting them often does teach me something about, why these things are happening and why they're needed, why they interconnect. Not unlike our conversation about balance. So in Meandering, you're standing at the foot of a stream that runs through the farmland. It's just kind of a meandering thing that rush of the water has carved out its path, and you're looking over the distance of several fields leading up to the foothills of the hill that's prominent in most of the paintings. You're submerged in a late winter, early spring shadow that's cast from the late day sun setting. So that warm light on the hillside is, the last light of the day. And in the distance, right in the middle, is a farmer burning some brush. And the landscape it's not straightforward. It's complicated to get through the painting, and it's complicated to sometimes meander through those fields. And so as they're getting ready to prep their fields for planting, they collect a lot of the brush from the tree rows that divide the fields and pile it to burn it and basically turn it into the soil as nutrients, as part of their nutrient system, and really just to get them cleared from the field so they can run their equipment through without messing them up. So it's, to me, it's not unlike painting in the city, where you're visually trying to figure out what things are. You have different shadows occurring, and the color shift from field to field, depending on what's there or what was there, tree line to tree line, little plots of farms. It's another part of it is just having those visual color shifts that create space in a painting. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like this painting, kind of that late day sun, you utilize dawn and dusk a lot in your paintings, which produce that great light and shadow that you were talking about. But there are 3 paintings in the show in which you almost take away the light completely. And I think these 3 nocturne paintings are so strong, and they're only lit by the moon or an artificial light source sometimes, which feels sometimes intrusive in the landscape, but then sometimes it feels otherworldly, specifically the painting Portal. How was it working in the dark versus working in the day?
Well, the nocturne is, again, something that I utilized prominently in probably like the first 5 years of my career. And once I started producing a lot of plein air landscape painting, I didn't do a lot of nocturnes anymore. And as I was moving through this body of work, one of the things that I truly love to paint is haze and fog and the things that narrow down that color contrast or value contrast. And really, if you want to create a sense of air and space, you need to pinpoint on color relationships rather than value relationships. And trying to manipulate that to create space and flatness at the same time has always kind of interested me. And it since once we went into lockdown, I saw night a little bit more than I normally do, and I started getting ideas for nocturnes, and that to me is just a flip-flop of painting haze and fog. It's that same narrow color range, but have to pinpoint the right colors to create space.
Mm-hmm.
They also, nocturnes, well, and really all of the paintings, these moments that kind of grab me are often the ones that there's striking color that comes out of all of this other color, and somehow you have to settle down all of that color to illuminate the one color you're focusing on.
Mm.
So to me, the nocturne isn't necessarily any different than painting day. It's just a different set of color.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Speaking of color, hear about that segue. You once told me that your painting, The Morningdale #2, was somewhat influenced by Mark Rothko. And at first, I didn't really put two and two together, but once you said it, I was like, yeah. And there's actually another painting in the show called In the Hereafter that I kind of see that Rockwell influence as well. We have to keep this answer a little bit shorter because we're running out of time, but I would love to hear a little bit about who some of your influences are.
Well, Rothko definitely is in a good majority of the pieces in the show, ponding, falling leaves, balance, meandering. I kind of view art history as a conversation that I continually have with it. And I enjoy artists from all over that scope. The Wyeth family, Antonio Lopez Garcia, Vermeer, Hopper, Turner, Rothko. Generally the artists that I really like are ones that are deeply connected to their place. But with Rothko, when I see a Rothko, I love the air and atmosphere he produces, and I always see my landscape in his work. And then when I'm in my landscape, I see Rothko. And so that's the kind of influence that not just Rothko, but these other artists, bring into the work. I sometimes see their work in my landscape, and it becomes part of my painting and the conversation. So
that's really spectacular. Now it makes me want to go through all the works in the show and see what other artists I can see in there in some way. I feel like that's a whole lecture in itself that we could dive into.
It probably could be.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, we have to wrap up, but thanks so much for spending some time with us today, Michael. It was really great talking to you about this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Michael Allen's solo exhibition at Somerville Manning Gallery is on view now through May 8th. It is an in-person exhibition and is on view in the gallery. The gallery is open to the public. Masks are required, and we are encouraging people to call ahead when possible. We look forward to seeing you all in the gallery. Thanks for joining us today on Art Watch Radio. This is Rebecca Moore, and make sure to tune in next Wednesday from 1 to 1:30 for a new episode. Take care, everyone.